Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Aztec's webinar on search engine optimization, how to get ranked. Today, we're going to take about 30 minutes and talk through SEO, what it is. We're going to take kind of a high-level overview. This is really meant for any level of background, experience, expertise. Hopefully, everyone can get something out of this webinar today. And we're going to kind of dive in. So my name is Ryan Morgan. I'm the Vice President of Digital Marketing here at Aztec, and my role is to head up our digital marketing team. We do everything from SEO to digital advertising, marketing automation, social media, content, and we work with primarily mid-sized organizations throughout the region. And today we are talking about SEO. And to kind of kick this off, let's all get on the same page and just kind of define what SEO is. SEO, which stands for search engine optimization, is the practice of increasing the quantity and quality of traffic to your website through organic search engine results. And today we're going to talk about how search engines like Google are prioritizing and ranking these. You'll hear me talk about their algorithm, and we're going to talk about specific steps that you can take no matter where you're at right now to think through an SEO strategy and what the next steps for your organization might be. So let's dive in. And for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be talking a lot about Google. Google is the dominant player when it comes to search engines. We certainly have Bing, to a lesser extent, Yahoo, and other search engines that are out there. But for the purposes of this, we're going to talk about the main player, which is Google. And you're going to hear me talk about the algorithm quite a bit. And the algorithm is essentially just Google's kind of secret sauce in terms of what are the factors that they take into effect when they're considering how to rank and how to show certain pages in their search results for certain queries. And this is not publicly shared. So Google doesn't publish a guide to all their secret sauce within their algorithm. And oftentimes, SEO professionals have to kind of reverse engineer and understand what those factors are. And through all of that research, we're going to talk about some of those things today. So I want to first give you where are we at today with ranking factors from a Google search perspective. These are going to be the important things that Google considers when they consider if they're going to rank and show your page in the search results for a specific search term or search phrase. Now, these are constantly evolving, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of ranking factors, all with different weights, and they are constantly changing. So we're going to give a very high-level overview of where this stands today. So the first important ranking factor is website security. This is very foundational in terms of SEO tactics that you should take. And, really, Google has placed a lot of importance on security for its users and has significantly rewarded and shown more secure websites in its search results. And it is actually showing users when they're potentially going to go to a website that is not secure. So they're really trying to move websites into security based on having an SSL certificate. So if your website starts with HTTPS, great, you're good to go. If it doesn't, this is something that I'm going to highly recommend later when we talk about tactics. The next big factor for Google is whether your site is mobile friendly or not. And you can see on this diagram, and I'll make it a little bit bigger here. So on the right-hand side, we have a site that is, responsive. It's easy to access and usable from a mobile device. And on the left, we have one that is basically a shrunk down version of the actual desktop website. And the problem with this is that it becomes not very usable for mobile users, right? It has a lot of pinch and zooming that you have to do. The tap targets for links are very small, so you oftentimes are missing those when you're trying to click on those. So this can be a very challenging environment. And just like Google is pushing security, they know that many users, in fact, probably greater than 50% of users are accessing their search engine from a mobile device. So they need to show results that are going to create a great user experience once people leave their search engine and go to that website. So again, if your site is not mobile friendly today, this is one of the key things that we're going to talk about. The next thing is accessibility. And when I talk about accessibility, I really mean, can Google access your website? Can they access and understand the content? Now, we're going into slightly more technical territory here, but two of the things that are really important factors in this are every site has a robots.txt file, or at least it should. Think of this just as a file that tells Google, here's the things that we want you to index and show in your search engines, and here's the things that we don't. This is one key element that's going to tell Google what pages to access on your page and which ones to not access. And then a sitemap is going to outline all of the pages and the hierarchy of those pages on your site and help Google understand all of the pages that are on your site so that they can index them more easily. Now, both of these can be accessed from a tool called Google Search Console. We're not going to get too far into that today, but it is a great free tool that Google has rolled out, that they continue to evolve, that can help you with some of these accessibility issues if you have them. The next ranking factor that we're going to talk about is domain authority. And this is essentially a combination of a number of things, but think about a spectrum from 0 to 100, 0 being a brand new site that no one knows about, no one's ever been to, and no other websites linked to on the web. This is typically going to have a domain authority of pretty close to 0. It has no trust because no trust has been built up yet. Conversely, at the other side of that spectrum, think about a site like Huffington Post or NewYorkTimes.com that is well established by a trusted brand, has a lot of links going to it, and is showing up prominently in search engines. This is going to have a domain authority of closer to 100. Now, there's a wide range within that spectrum, but the more authoritative your site is, and this is going to include things like how old is your domain, how long has your site and the pages been around, how many links do you have coming to your site? These are all factors in domain authority. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but this is a pretty big factor in terms of how Google will rank pages in their search engine. The next thing, and this has grown immensely over the last couple years, is content quality. And by that, essentially the goal of Google is to provide the best resource, the best answer, the best page for a user's query. And when we talk about content quality, if your page is the absolute best piece of content that serves the need for a specific user search, it's going to have a really good chance of ranking well. We're going to talk about some of the factors of content quality and how you define quality a little bit more. But no more can we just jam in a bunch of keywords that we think are important or relevant to the user and have kind of a shallow page rank really well. Content quality has become increasingly important to search engines like Google. On-page SEO is a big factor as well. This is where we really start talking into the nitty-gritty SEO. And when we talk about this, there's many things behind the scenes of a web page that are giving a search engine like Google more information about what that page is about, and it's giving it more context. Things like a title tag and description. These are what actually shows up in Google's search results. So these are really important for Google, not only to understand what a page is about, but when a user sees that search result, this is going to be what they're evaluating if this is a page that they want to visit based on their search term. And then you've got things like the URL, headings on the page, image tags. All these things are kind of tactical SEO elements that can be optimized so that you improve your chances of a certain page ranking and showing up within search results. And then off-page SEO, I mentioned domain authority, and one of the factors for that is how many strong links you have coming back to your site. And link building is one of the tactics to do that. But off-page SEO is essentially what are the factors outside of your site, like incoming quality links, social signals, things like that, that Google looks at to say, well, how trustworthy do other sites or other people think this site is? And they take that into consideration as well. One of the bigger ones that Google has been pushing lately, and this is probably within the last 2 to 3 years, is an acronym called EAT or EAT. And this stands for expertise, authority, and trust. And essentially, Google has placed a really big importance on websites and pages and content that are authoritative, that are written by individuals or contributors that have expertise and that are trustworthy. It's just like if you wanted to get health information, if you were looking up specific symptoms, you would feel really comfortable going to clevelandclinic.com, for example, or a reputable hospital system. But if you went to a site that maybe didn't have the same backing, the same research, the same credibility, you would be leery of those results. And this is what Google is trying to solve for. They really want content to be written and produced by individuals or organizations that have the expertise and authority to write about that content. And there are ways that you can support this that we'll talk about a little bit later. So we've set the foundation for what are the ranking factors today. This is a very high level. There are hundreds of ranking factors that we haven't talked about. Those are the most important ones, and they're often the most accessible ones for us to be able to access and update and do project work on that will actually impact positively your organization's SEO performance. So let's get into the tactical a little bit now and walk through how do you do SEO? What are the components of this? And when I look at this, I kind of look at it as a pyramid in some sense. And you have kind of the foundation. And once you kind of build each step, you can move on to the next step. So we're going to talk about the foundational SEO steps that you can take that every organization, every website should have. And if you don't, this is a great place to start. We move on to some basic SEO tactics. Then we focus, and really 75% of your focus should be on content and improving content quality. And then we get into some more advanced SEO tactics that you can take. And we're going to talk about all of these. So let's first talk about that foundation. What are the things that you should do first? And if you're further in the process, go back and do these things so that you have a solid foundation to build from an SEO perspective. So 3 things that I would highly recommend that I've already mentioned. Ensure that your site is secure. If you don't have an SSL certificate on your site, it's the best investment that you will make. It is incredibly inexpensive. There are free options that I can share. This is something that, go type in your URL for your website. If you don't see this green lock and HTTPS, this is absolutely not an action item that you should look at today. Second, if your site is not mobile friendly today, if you have not designed a responsive site, or at the very least, a mobile separate version of your site, although that is not really recommended today, I would highly recommend going on your site from a mobile device and taking a good hard look at how user-friendly it is. If it's not, I would encourage you to take steps towards making it more user-friendly. And that may mean you keep a lot of the content and imagery, but you need to update the responsive styles. You need to work with a web design firm. Or it may mean a complete redesign to make sure that it is really embodying not only the right content, but the right design. And then ensuring that your site is accessible. Can Google actually find your site and understand what it's all about? And again, I would recommend ensuring that you have a sitemap and that Google is indexing that sitemap. You can do this within Google Search Console, and I'm more than happy to talk about that afterwards about how you actually go about doing that. And make sure that you have a robots.txt file and it's not blocking any pages that you would want to be indexed from Google. Some of these get into a little bit more technical territory. That's why you have, some technical experts like the people on our team, but more than happy to walk through those later if anyone has questions. So once you have that foundational level, the next thing that we want to do is dive into some basic SEO. This is kind of core SEO that you can do that's not incredibly time consuming, but is going to add a lot of value. So I showed this image earlier, and essentially what we have here is, behind the scenes of your site, there's a lot of information. And if you're using a content management system like WordPress or Umbraco, then you very likely have access to all of this information. The things that I would typically focus on are the meta title, which is the title that's going to show up when you have a tab open in a browser. It's going to be what shows up as the title in search results in Google. So you want to make sure this is optimized. And I'll talk about kind of what optimization means, but making sure that you have one and that it's not too long, it's not too short, and you are focusing on the right keywords. A meta description is not a ranking factor for Google. So jamming it with a bunch of keywords is not going to help you. But this is the description that searchers will see in the search results in Google. And it's incredibly important for you to write that from a perspective of what's going to make the person that's searching want to click on my result in search results. Make sure it's not too long. Make sure it's not too short. Make sure it's compelling enough that people are going to click on it. Within a site, within a page, you also have a structure of what are called header tags. For those of you not comfortable with code, that's completely fine. Most content management systems will allow you to select these right in an editor. And they typically have a hierarchy. So H1 is the most important header on the page. What is that page about? H2, you can have multiple of these to talk about subtopics. H3 underneath your H2s and so on. Making sure that on each page you have just one H1, that it is descriptive about what the page is about, and that you have a good structure for all those other header tags is important because those give Google a lot of context about what a page is about. And these header tags carry a bit more weight than normal text on your page. And then for every image on your page, behind that is what's called an alt tag. And this is initially built for accessibility for people that are using screen readers and things like that, for a screen reader to actually describe what an image is. But Google has used this for years to help it understand what an image is about. And you can add rich keywords into these image alt tags as well to give Google, again, more context as to the content of that actual page. So this is fundamental. And if you have a small website that has, 10, 20, 30 pages, I would highly recommend doing this for every single page you have. Now, if you have a large website or you're working with an e-commerce website, thinking about this for every page, if you have hundreds or thousands, can be daunting. So prioritizing and understanding what are the most important pages that you have, oftentimes homepage, category pages, things like that, can be a good way to prioritize those. So now we get onto content, and realistically, content is 75% or more of the SEO equation. No more can we game the SEO system by jamming in as many keywords as we want or taking tactics that don't really add quality for the user. In the end, Google wants to show users quality content that answers users' questions, that provides them with the information that they want to know. So let's talk about what is quality content. So first of all, quality content is focused on the right keywords. For each of your pages, you should have a keyword or at least topic or phrase upon which you built that page. What is that page about? And you should use it in the page, use it in the page title, use it in a header or two. Don't add it everywhere you can because it's the keyword that you've chosen for this page, but make sure it's prevalent on the page and make sure that you're writing the content around that topic. Good content is focused on user intent. When you think about the keyword, let's say someone is searching for digital marketing services, and I think about the intent of that search. Someone is likely looking for, well, what digital marketing services does this website offer? What are the prices of their digital marketing services? How do I sign up? What's the process like? I need to get in that user's mind and really understand what they're looking for. And if you can cater your content to what the searcher is looking for, you're going to see much better SEO results. To build on that, your content answers the user's questions. More and more users are literally typing in questions in the search bar today. And the better you can understand those questions and answer them, the better SEO performance you're going to see. But also on every single one of your page, think about what questions users have. And a great way to look at this is talk to your sales team or talk to your customer service team and say, what are the common questions that you get around this product or this service or this topic? And try to integrate content into your page surrounding those questions. A lot of people ask us, a lot of clients and prospects ask us, what's the best length of content for a page? Or is it true that the longer the page, the better? And studies have shown that longer content does perform better, but I always challenge this idea because I don't necessarily think that how long a piece of content is dictating how well it performs. I think it's how deep a piece of content is. So if you're able to, really answer the user's questions and help solve what the user is looking for in 500 words, that could be the right depth. But conversely, you may have a really complex topic that requires 2,500 or 5,000 words. So ensuring that you go deep enough in terms of solving what the user is trying to look for is more important than aiming for a certain word count. And then finally, a strong piece of content has, as we've talked about, strong text, well-written text, error-free, good grammar, things like that. It has images, so it has a good mix of images and multimedia. Video is a great way to break up long pieces of content, and video is also readily indexable by Google. In fact, if you're using a YouTube video, Google and YouTube are essentially one, and you're going to get a little bit more impact from that as well. So now we're on to the final, the very top of the pyramid, which is you've got that foundation, you've done some of the basic SEO, you've really optimized and focused on your content, and now there's some advanced SEO tactics that you can take. And we're not going to talk about all of them, but we're going to talk about some of the more impactful ones. So I mentioned that off-page link building, off-page SEO is one of those factors that can help improve your domain authority. Basically how much Google is seeing your site is trusted. And quality link building is one of the ways that you can do that. And there's many ways you can do that. You can reach out to relevant industry associations, publications, partners, forums, all kinds of different places. Make sure they're relevant and genuinely ask and see if there are opportunities for you to contribute to those sites or to be added to directory lists and attain links back to your site. Another very common practice is guest posting on other relevant blogs and attaining a link back to your site as well. So the more quality links you have coming back to your site from other quality sites, the better your chances are going to be at getting more search exposure in search engines. Getting into a little bit technical territory here, things like metadata, schema, rich snippets, markup. These are all things that are kind of behind the scenes elements that tell a search engine like Google, what is this piece of content? And, there's a very small example here, but Google has started to roll out questions and answers. And essentially, you can ask a question and get an answer right within the search results, not even have to go to that page. And oftentimes, they're able to do that by having metadata and schema and rich information behind the scenes that tells Google what that piece of content is. Maybe one of the most important things here is page speed updates. So Google, again, as it places more importance on user experience, how fast a page loads is incredibly important to Google. They don't want to send users to a page that takes 20, 30 seconds to load, even 10 seconds. They want to send users to pages that load quick and have an excellent user experience. There is a great tool that I recommend you use. It's called Google PageSpeed Insights. It's free. Just go Google it. And essentially what this tool is going to do is it's going to give you a score for any page on your site from 0 to 100, 0 being incredibly slow, 100 being incredibly fast. And it's also going to give you recommendations for how you can increase the page speed. Now, some of these recommendations are going to be things that a designer or developer may have to do, but at least having a baseline and understanding how fast your pages load and what are the action items that you would think about taking to increase page speed is a really great next step. I talked about usability, and usability has become really important for Google as well. Just like they don't want to send users to sites that aren't mobile friendly, they don't want to send users to sites that have a poor user experience. And this can be anything from having links and things that are too hard to tap, poor contrast where the content isn't readable, pop-ups, things like that. Anything that's going to get in the way of a positive user experience. These are things that you want to make sure that especially your mobile user experience is as user-friendly as possible. And finally, we talked about content updates, and I pair this with advanced SEO because, updating the content on your site and updating some of the on-page SEO is a great first step. But when we really engage with a client on an SEO project, we are going in depth to understand what a page is ranking for now. What are some opportunities for that page to rank for potentially other keywords? What is the competition writing about and ranking for? And then we do a really in-depth analysis and try and understand what are the questions that need to be answered here? What are some similar keywords and topics that people think about when they're looking for this topic? How long does the piece of content, and maybe even how deep should the piece of content be? Does it need media, images? So there can be a very thorough process in terms of updating and getting content really in depth that tends to skew on that side of more in-depth SEO. So those are the tactics. And now we've gotten to the point of the question that everyone has, and it's an incredibly fair question. And I'm fairly impatient myself and would be wondering this myself. And that question is, how long does SEO take? Everyone wants to know this. And the answer that I give that everyone hates universally is it depends. And that's absolutely true. And I won't leave it at that. I'm going to tell you why it depends and what it depends on. So let's get into that a little bit. The first thing is it depends on the competition. So I have two examples here, and let me expand this a little bit. On the left, we have an example of a query for just shoes, and there are 5.6 trillion results for this. And you're competing against sites like Skechers and all the big retail companies. Incredibly hard to compete. If we had a prospect or a client come to us and say, I want to rank on the first page for shoes, I will say it's impossible. It's not going to happen because of that competition. But the more niche, the more what we call long tail keywords we focus on, the less competition there is. So when we get a lot more specific and search for something like men's leather Sperry topsider, a very specific shoe, Now, there are still a lot, 9 million results, but compared to 5.6 trillion, we have much better odds, and we can get much more specific with that content. So every keyword and keyword group and phrase and topic is going to have different competition, but understanding that the more specific you can get and the more niche you can get by looking at long tail keywords, the better off you're going to be in terms of increasing your ability to rank quicker in search engines. The next thing it depends on is your authority. We've talked a lot about domain authority, and I'll give another example here. I'll expand my screen. So this is a search for productivity tips. And the number 2 result here is an article from Entrepreneur, 101 time management tips to boost productivity every day. And Entrepreneur has a domain authority of 91, and that's out of 100. So very high, very reputable site. On the other hand, all the way down at position 105 is a very similar article. Productivity, 10 tips for a successful day every day. Now, it doesn't have 101 tips, but by and large, these are similar in nature. But this is from a site called Sprout New Media that only has a domain authority of 41. So you can see here how very similar content can actually rank very differently depending on the authority of the site. So again, this comes into competition. If you're trying to compete for a keyword where all of the results on the first page or 2 pages are huge websites or huge entities, it's going to be more challenging to rank for those. And this is something that when we research SEO opportunities, we look pretty deeply at this to understand where we have good opportunities versus more challenging opportunities. And the final thing that it depends on, frankly, is content. We've talked about content a lot during this presentation. And again, it's going to depend on if your content is better than the other content that's showing up for that search result. If you have a piece of content that answers all the questions, that is deep in all the right ways in terms of providing all the information that a user would need, it's rich with images and multimedia, then you have a really good chance of being able to compete in search rankings. But if you have a really shallow piece of content that's maybe 2 paragraphs, not particularly compelling from a visual standpoint, it's going to be a lot more challenging to raise up in those rankings. And these are all very gray areas, right? I mean, content is in the eye of the beholder. And in this case, the beholder is Google, as is some of these other things that we talked about. Authority is a more definitive measure, but competition is going to vary widely depending on the keywords that you choose. So, ultimately, we really see how long does SEO take? It ranges. A lot of times I'll say it can take 3 to 6 months for a new piece of content to start ranking. If you have a really low competition keyword or topic that you're targeting, and you build a really strong piece of content, we've seen that rank really well within a month. But conversely, we've also seen really strong pieces of content in a really competitive environment take 12 months or more to, show up in the first 5 pages of Google results. So it's all about strategizing what you want to do from an SEO perspective and looking for those good opportunities where you have lower competition, you can develop really strong content, and you have a good opportunity to produce content that works. So those are at a very high level, kind of the status of the SEO marketplace right now. We talked about ranking factors. We talked about some of the different steps that you can take. And we talked about how long it takes. So I want to hear from everyone else. Open this up for Q&A. You should have a chat box on the right. Feel free to throw chat questions in there. I'm more than happy to answer those questions, and we can go from there. We have a question already. Channing asked he would love to learn any secrets for making LinkedIn profiles SEO optimized. So this is a great question. And obviously we focus a lot on Google today, but LinkedIn, very much like Google, has its own algorithm for how it shows in this case, people in search results. And some of the best things that you can do, again, we can take some learnings from this specific presentation and say, think about keywords. So what are the keywords? If you're looking at developing relationships, what are the keywords that people may be looking for? In my case, it may be a digital marketing specialist or digital marketing expert, for example. And identify where you can add those keywords into a LinkedIn profile, for example. LinkedIn also gives you the opportunity to put together a headline. And oftentimes this just defaults to your current position at your current company. But you can change this, again, to use some of those rich keywords in that profile. So those are two tactics that you can take. LinkedIn is a little bit of a different animal, and certainly we can go more in depth. But those are two things that I would do right off the bat. Derek asked, is there a tool to measure our company website domain authority? Yeah, so there are quite a few tools. They're all going to vary a little bit. This is, we use a tool called SEMrush to do a lot of this backend work. It's a paid tool and it's not the cheapest tool. There are free tools out there. And I believe if you search for free domain authority checker or free domain authority tool, I believe Ahrefs is one of those tools that allows you to do that. Moz, you can find them at moz.com, also has a tool that will allow you to look at domain authority as well. So those are two good tools that you can use to kind of find out, not only where you're at, but where your competition is at, to understand how do you kind of stack up and how could you stack up in the search results. I'm going to leave this open for another minute. If anyone has any other questions, those are great questions from Derek and Channing. I appreciate those questions. I'm going to leave this open for one more minute. I do want to mention, just as we kind of wrap up this webinar, really appreciate everyone joining today. Hope you had a few things that you could take away regardless of what level you're at. If you're in a position where you have questions and want to learn more about specific strategies, want to get an understanding of where you're at today, Aztec offers a really great complimentary 30-minute strategy session. If you go to aztecweb.com/strategy, you can sign up for a strategy session directly with me. I'll do a little bit of auditing beforehand to come to that session with some observations, and we can talk through, where are you at right now and what are the next steps in terms of SEO strategy or holistic digital marketing strategy. In the meantime, Channing had a great follow-up question specifically to LinkedIn profiles. And my recommendations are actually going to be very similar. So one of the nice things is you get some space for writing a company profile. Again, the more rich you can make that with relevant keywords, and I'm not talking about jamming this with as many keywords as you can, but focusing on the right keywords and adding that to that copy and making sure that that profile is really well written, that's going to help you out considerably. I would say you want to make sure that your location information is very consistent with what's on Google or Google My Business, as well as your site. Google rewards consistency in those as well. And from a company profile standpoint, I would recommend you to be regularly posting relevant content to your audience. That's going to be one of the most important things from a findability and discoverability perspective, is how active are you? And are you starting to build this network where people are sharing your content and therefore other people are seeing your content and will come back to your company page, potentially follow it, and you can grow your follower base that way. So great question, Channing. It looks like we are about wrapped up here. Again, I appreciate everyone sitting in today. I would encourage you, if you have any more questions or want to continue the conversation, aztecweb.com/strategy. Schedule a complimentary 30-minute strategy session with me. I love having these conversations. And in the meantime, appreciate everyone. Hope you learned a few things today, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.